So we're learning about Eruv, an Eruv Chatzeris, carrying from one domain to one person's domain to another domain of another person, or if there's rights to several people in this domain. So they have to put together food. They contribute to each other. Now, what happens if there's a non-Jew? Can you join together to become one family with him? So the rule is that you can't. You have to do it differently. If there's a non-Jew there, then you have to rent his property. So we're learning now. It's either with a non-Jew, akum is idolater, or with someone that doesn't acknowledge the halachas of Eiruvin. Why? He's a kuti, Samaritan. That's how we're explaining it. This makes everything forbidden. You can't carry in that area. You can't carry from the houses to the courtyard because of the non-Jew or because of the kuti that's there. We'll see how to resolve it. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, well, the Gemara is going to explain what the machlekes is, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. But he says that just one Jew and one non-Jew is still acceptable. It's only when there's two Jews and there's one non-Jew, that's when things start to go sour, and you can't carry them. Amar Rabbi Gamliel says, the Mishnah is sort of missing some words because we switched topics here, and also that will be explained also. Rabbi Gamliel says, Ma'aseh b'tzeduki echad. We didn't mention a tzedukah yet. We mentioned an idolater, we mentioned a Samaritan. Now a tzedukah is a Sadducee. There was a story with a Sadducee. They didn't believe in the Rabbanan, Tersh Bal Peh. He's Jewish, just doesn't, just not following the same beliefs. He lived with us b'Mavi b'Yerushalayim, in the alleyway in Yerushalayim. V'amalanu Abar, our father said to us, "Mara v'yitziu es hakelim l'Mavi ad sheyetzer v'yesher aleichem." See, there's a solution. What do you do if there's a non-Jew living in the courtyard? So, not a non-Jew, I shouldn't say that. What do you do if someone forgot to make their Eruv? A Jew forgot to make his Eruv. So what he can do is he can say, actually, the courtyard and my rights to it, I'm giving it up. Everyone can have it. It's not mine. So, okay, so it's like he's a guest here. And a guest isn't going to ruin the domain, the usage of the courtyard. So there was this Sadducee there that he was mevatel his rishus. He said, "You can use my rights. I don't need the rights to the courtyard." However, Rabbi Gamliel says that our father told us we should hurry before he retracts. Take ownership of it quickly, because if he retracts before you take ownership, it's not going to work. Rabbi Yehuda says differently. Yehuda says you got to get everything done before Shabbos, because the Sadducee, the Tzedukah, can always retract any time on Shabbos, and you really can't use the courtyard at all on Shabbos because of him. You have to get everything done on Erev Shabbos. So the issue of carrying in a courtyard is carrying from the house to the courtyard. The items that are in the courtyard, that will be fine. So bring everything out before Shabbos, because we have the Sadducee here that could mess it up. We will see afterwards what the machlekes are. What's going on? We have three types of people in the Mishnah. We have an akum, an akuti, and we have a tzeduki. The Mishnah didn't give us a solution for the akum or the kuti, but it spoke about the solution for the tzeduki, which was to be mevatel the rishus, and then you can either use it quickly or use it first. One or the other. The difference is if you use it first, you have it the whole Shabbos. The first opinion was yes, and the second opinion was it doesn't help. he can always retract anytime he wants. Okay. The relevance of this is apartment buildings and hotels, and whenever you're in an area where there are other people, you're allowed to carry in the hallways, in the front lobby, all of these things. It's very relevant, even though, I have 4 walls, what's the problem? Yeah, 4 walls, that's what we're dealing with, 4 walls, and there's still a problem, because it's other people living there. Then it becomes interesting, what happens, well, if they're all Jewish, then everyone contributes. That's what we did in Crown Heights, we lived in a building. So everyone contributed, Erev Pesach, I think, and then we could carry in the hallways. Let's say there are non-Jewish people there. Then we had to rent from the maintenance person, I forgot what he's called. That we'll see. We'll see on this. Yosef Abaya bar Oven, Rav China bar Oven, Yosef Abaya Gamaya. Abaya bar Oven, Rav China bar Oven are sitting, and Abaya is there as well. Yosef Akamri, and this is what they're saying. Bishleimer Reb Meir. It works out well according to Reb Meir. By the way, Reb Meir would be the first opinion here. The Tanakama. Kasavar, he holds Dira Seibet Kechavim Shmei Dira. The residence of a non-Jew or of an idolater is considered a real residence, and V'leish Nachad V'leish Natrei. It doesn't matter how many of them are there. I have a residence that's not a private residence. I have the Jew and I have the non-Jew. It's not a private residence. You need to make an Eruv, the joining together with contributing food, because there's more than one individual here. And it doesn't matter if it's one Jew and one non-Jew, or 2 Jews and one non-Jew. Elul Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, my Kasavar. What does Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov hold? Where did he come up with this thing? That if 2 Jews are there, then another non-Jew, an idolater, is going to ruin the whole Eruv. If he holds that the residence of a non-Jew is considered a real residence, so now it's not a private residence because there's 1 Jew and there's a non-Jew. So why does there need to be 2 Jews for the Eruv issue to come up? And if the residence of a non-Jew doesn't count, as you see when there's 1 Jew and 1 non-Jew, it's no problem. Even if there's 2 Jews, it shouldn't be an issue. Why does the other Jew make the issue here? Abaya says to these 2 Amirayim, Abaya Baravin and Rav China Baravin, maybe they're brothers. Yeah, Abi, that's probably what you were referring to. These 2 brothers. So Amla Abaya v'Savra Meir Dir Sakim Shmei Dira. Where do you get this from? Abaya doesn't. Reb Meir doesn't hold that the residence of a non-Jew is actually considered a residence. Where do we see that? V'Hatanya, you see in the Brisa, Chatzir Shalev K'Chavim Hariya K'der Shel Behema, the courtyard of a non-Jew. It's like a pen of an animal. That means that his residence doesn't affect the carrying out from the houses to the courtyards. That means that they don't have a real residence. It doesn't count halachically. Doesn't affect the laws of Eiruvin. We have a brisa later. It's going to be the opinion of Reb Meir. So what's the issue over here? Over there, it's going to be talking about when there's only non-Jews. Are you allowed to walk into a non-Jewish apartment building and carry from his apartment into the hallway, into the courtyard? It's not going to be an issue. And over here, all of a sudden, it is an issue. So what's the issue? The residence itself is not the issue here. It's not considered a real residence. It's unbelievable. We're worried that the Jew is going to learn from the actions of the non-Jew. We don't want him to live in that building, in that complex. We want him to find another location. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, well, who's going to buy who's going to rent a place or live in an area that's non-Jewish? They could kill you. They could kill the Jewish guy. It's not safe. So no one's gonna move in there. So Trey, if there's two Jewish people, I'll say, well, already we're moving into the new area. I have two people already. It's not going to be an issue. So then the shchichi the darbu. So they made a gzeira that, by the way, you move into that area, you should know you can't carry out of the apartment. You can't carry out of the house. I wouldn't go there. It's not so easy. So two people possibly would do that. One person is never going to move into that area. So like goes to Rabbanan, they didn't make exer. The Rabbanan made exer on something that's common. Rab Meir said, "Zimnu demikri v'dayer v'amrabanan neir v'meil b'makamakam v'mitlu v'shus meil b'makamakam v'shiaske v'akam le'maiger." Okay, let's see what's going on. Rab Meir holds cheshina l'miuta, that even though it's not common, but nevertheless we suspect that it could happen. Now, it is possible that a Jewish person may decide to move into an area, a complex that has a non-Jew living there. Just one Jew is going to move into that complex, and we don't want him to. So we say you can't make an Eruv with him. So what can you do? The other thing was, if you don't make an Eruv, so the person could be Mevatel his Rishus. He says, I give up my rights. Well, you can't give up the rights either by a non-Jew. It's only a Jew that could give up the rights. That was we learned by the Tzeduki. He was Jewish. The non-Jew, we didn't learn that. You can't give up his rights. So what can you do? You have to rent it. You have to rent his rights. Now, the non-Jew, the non-Jew, the idolater is not going to want to rent. My time, why won't he rent his rights to the property? Allow the Jew to carry out. Maybe he thinks, well, he's starting to take over the whole complex. Yeah, he's going to first he starts like this. Next, he's going to buy my place out, and we'll be out of here. So he doesn't want to do that. So, what type of renting do you need? Is it a real renting, or is it a symbolic renting? Bria means a healthy, strong one. So we get it. If it's a real renting, that you have to rent the rights to the common area, then we understand the issue. But if it's just a symbolic one, what's the problem? We'll make a symbolic thing. An Erev Tavshilin type of thing. Okay, you hold up a piece of egg or whatever. It's not a big deal. Why should he be afraid of that? The Itmar, okay, there's a statement, there's a machlekes. Rav Chisda Amar Schiris Bria, Rav Sheshes Amar Schiris Ruah. Rav Chisda holds it needs to be a real renting. And Rav Sheshes holds that it could be a weaker renting. That's the halacha. My Ruah, my Bria, what does it mean weak and strong? It doesn't mean a healthy, a strong renting means that you have to rent it with a Shava Pruta. In a weak renting means that you use less than a Shava Pruta. Less than a Shava Pruta is also something. It also is significant by a non-Jew. Less than a Shava Pruta is significant. In the banking system, you take one less than a Shava Pruta from every person. Doesn't get noticed, but less than a Shava Pruta is also something. V'hashalach Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yaakov bar Giyuri b'shmeid Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yaakov bar Giyuri, said over. He sent in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Yodim should know that you can do the renting even less than a Shava Pruta. V'amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan ben Noach nerag al pachas mishava Pruta v'lei nitin leishava. The Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. One of them is that you can't steal. The rule is that the Ben Noach, he only has 7 laws, but those laws have capital punishment, very strict. Yeah. In the philosophy of how to make laws, a lot of laws with less punishment, or fewer laws with stricter punishment. So the non-Jews have less laws but very strict punishments. So what happens if they steal less than a shava pruta? Same halacha. And they can't return it. Can't return it means that it doesn't help to return it. By a Jew, if he steals, so he returns it. And he gets whatever, if it's stolen or robbed, he pays double, whatever the issues are. But by a non-Jew, it's automatically capital punishment. So we see less than a shava pruta is also something. So you can't tell me that the difference between a healthy renting, which is Rav Chisda's opinion and Rav Shes's opinion, a weaker renting, there's a difference between shava pruta, less than a shava pruta, because less than a shava pruta, everyone holds is considered a real renting. Ella bria b'mayharki va'aburgni. Like is what this means. A healthy renting means that you have the full rights to use it. You can bring your chairs and your benches into the courtyard. Ru'ua is b'lay maharki va'aburgni. And a weaker renting is you don't have the full rights to use it. That's the way Rashi learns it. It means it's a symbolic renting. Taisus learns that maharki va'aburgni means that it was done with signed and sealed with a document. Okay, whatever the case is. We were discussing that a non-Jew is not going to want to rent it. And we don't want, the whole reason for this, why an Eruv doesn't work with a non-Jew, is because we don't want Jews living in those those areas where there's just non-Jews, because they're going to learn from their ways. So what do? We say that the Eruv doesn't work. So, well, they could rent it. So we say, well, he's not going to want to rent. It's going to be difficult. So we get it. He's not going to want to rent. But if you don't need a real renting, what's the problem? It's just a symbolic renting. The non-Jew will say, hey, do me a favor, lift up this thing. This is going to give me some halachic thing don't worry about it. So what's the problem? Even though it's not a real renting, the non-Jew, the idolater, is going to be afraid of witchcraft. In order for witchcraft to work, you have to take an item of something that the person owns. And so he's going to start doing witchcraft. He bought the rights of something symbolic. I don't know what he's going to do next. So he's not going to want to do it. It's very interesting that Chazal set this up in a way. They could have also said that you can't live in an area where there's a non-Jew. They could have also said that renting doesn't work. They didn't do any of that. They said renting works. You could live in an area with a non-Jew. We just make it very difficult because there are situations where that's what a person needs to do. We just didn't set it up in the most convenient form, in the most convenient way, to make it that it's easy. But yes, it's allowed. I mean, it's possible to do. It's just difficult. They put in these roadblocks.
Didn't we have it that they wouldn't that they shouldn't live together because they're learning from the ways and things like that?
Yeah, that's what we're discussing. But why didn't they say that you're not allowed to? Why did they give solutions? I'm saying that it's not that it's usher. They just discouraged it. And they discouraged it by making it difficult in different areas. Okay, Gufa. Gufa usually was a quote of Amiroim. Over here it's a quote of Tanan. We had this once before, and I'm realizing that this quote we never mentioned. Usually Gufa is, let's return to something that we mentioned. We never mentioned this before. We did part of it, but not the whole thing. Okay, we learned that a courtyard of an idolater is like a pen, an animal pen. But you can go into that area, to his the non-Jewish apartment building. You can carry from the apartments into the courtyard, even though there's a bunch of non-Jews living there. However, when Yesham Yisrael Echad Eiser, if there's one Jew, then everything becomes forbidden. Can't carry from the courtyard, from even the non-Jewish courtyards. The Yisrael makes it forbidden even to carry from the non-Jewish houses into the courtyard.
Funny, the reason for that is very interesting because it sounds denigrating almost if you look at it on face value to call it property of somebody else like a property of a behemoth, but the reason is completely makes sense. It's just not a rishus, so rishus doesn't apply to a guy.
Right.
A guy doesn't have rishus and have rishus yachid, so it's not a rishus b'chlal. So it's just like an animal walking in and walking out, it's just garnished.
Right.
It's not because
although
of
the comparison, I hear what you're saying, Avi. The comparison is not. They could have done. It's like the dira of a malach. They could have said.
Yeah, exactly.
Also not. They could have used a different example. But we do have other sources where the Torah denigrates the idolaters.
Of course.
It doesn't view them as any. It views them the way the Romans viewed the barbarians.
Right, like the Gemara had with all the Hashmatis in the back, all the things that were denigrating that they pulled out.
Okay. That's the opinion of Reb Meir. A bunch of non-Jews is not a problem. One Jew there is a problem. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says, no, it's not one Jew that creates a problem. It's only two Jews that create the problem. And like we explained before, that one Jew, Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov, wasn't concerned of. So there was no reason to make Xer. He's never going to move into there. But two Jews, to move across, 6th Avenue or something, 163rd. So that, two Jews already are, they're going to start a development. That's already a concern. We have to make Xer. Amar Mar. That's what we taught. That's what we learned. A courtyard of idolaters is like a pen of animals. In order to understand this Gemara, I have to read the Rashi. Usually we don't read the Rashi inside, but Rashi adds in what's being implied, what the Gemara is implying here, just to understand it's almost impossible. It says, Amar Mar, if you look at the top Rashi on Samach Beis, Kadir Shel Behema, Denachri Lo Yasser Midi. That's what we're learning. A non-Jew doesn't make anything forbidden. V'chidaya Yisrael Gabei, and when a Jew lives over there, Kamar Reb Meir the Yisrael, Huda Eiser Al Beisei Shalakim. Reb Meir says that the Jew dwelling in that area causes that the house of the Akum can't be used. You can't carry from the house of the Akum, of the non-Jew, into the courtyard. Now here's the point. Aval Akum Eino Israel Beisei Shel Yisrael. But the Jewish house he still could use. This we didn't see anywhere. Without the Rashi, I wouldn't have known that this was the issue. But Rashi is telling us, Kadir Shel Behema, but okay, now we have a question. But Tanan, back in the Gemara, what are you telling me? That the Jewish house is still accessible and you can carry from the Jewish house to the courtyard. It was only the non-Jewish house that gets messed up by the Jew living there. But the Jewish house is still accessible. 1 second, our Mishnah says if someone lives Hadar Ma'akim, the beginning of the Mishnah B'chatzar, Reza Yisrael, the Akim makes that the Jewish house can't be used. Can't carry from the Jewish house into the courtyard. Says like Kash. The Mishnah, there is the Isay, where the non-Jew is actually there for Shabbos. The Bryce is talking about the Lesser, where the non-Jew isn't there for Shabbos. Depends if he's there. Talking about when he's not there, so then you can't carry from his house into the courtyard, but the Jewish house he still could carry into the courtyard. The Gemara asks, "My kasaver, what do we hold? Do you hold that a residence without the owner there, without the owner present, is considered a dwelling, a residence? Afilu akum naminitzer. Akum. Then the non-Jew should, I guess it means affect the Jewish house. Even if he's not there, it should be forbidden. Just the house of the Akum should be usher. And if it doesn't count, because the owner isn't there, then why does the Jew affect the non-Jewish house? It's not considered a residence. He's not there. Why the Jew being there does it affect? What's going on over here? We're asking. Does it matter if is it considered a residence when the owner isn't home? Does it aser on the other one? So if it is considered a residence, so then why is the Jewish house allowed to be used? Even though the owner's not home. When the owner's not home, the Jewish house is allowed to be used to access you can bring things from the house to the courtyard. 1 second, it's considered a residence. If it's not considered a residence, then why is the non-Jewish house not allowed to be used? There's no problem. There's no residence. Really, it's not considered a residence. Yisrael works like this. The fact that a Jewish residence is considered a real residence, the Chi say, if the Jew is home, then it's asar. He actually makes it forbidden. You can't carry from another Jew, if there would be 2 Jews there, you wouldn't be able to carry from the other one's house. In other words, a Jewish residence actually causes that you can't carry from if there's more than one person here, then you can't carry from the house to the courtyard. So kilasa. So if he's not home, so then gozer bei rabbanan. There's a gzeira. If he's home, it's a real isser. If he's not home, there's a gzeira. Akum, but by a non-Jew, the chiyisa, even if he is home, there's no problem. The whole issue is just a gzeira shem yom dumimaisav. The whole issue is that we're just going to learn from his ways. So we don't want you to be able to make an eruv. So kiyisa, when he is home, asa, kilesa la yasa. But if he's not home, we didn't make the gzeira. Okay. V'chilesa la yasar. If he's not home, there's no problem. So v'hatanan, but we have a Mishnah. Miniachas beisa v'halach leilish beis b'eracheres. Echad Nachri ve'echad Yisrael. Oisir divrei Reb Meir. There's a problem here. It says if someone is in another courtyard for Shabbos, it still creates a problem. And it says whether it's a Jew or a non-Jew, it creates a problem. The Gemara says Hasam dasabiyam, that's because he's returning on Shabbos. That's why it's a problem. He's really home. He's just right at the beginning of Shabbos, he wasn't home, but he's coming back. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Rav Yehuda is a student of Shmuel. He says, Halachic Reb Los ben Yaakov. It takes 2 Jews in a courtyard to make the courtyard forbidden to be used without the Eruv. And the non-Jew being there creates the problem that you need to rent it now. But if it's just 1 Jew and 1 non-Jew, there would be no problem. You don't even need an Eruv. An Eruv wouldn't work, but you don't need anything. That's your opinion of Reb Los ben Yaakov. And Shmuel says that the halacha is like Reb Los ben Yaakov, and that's what we paskin. Giving a shir in Hilchos Eiruvin, Shmuel says, you tell everyone the halacha is like Reb Los ben Yaakov. Rav Huna Amar minag Reb Los ben Yaakov. When it says you don't announce that in public, however, if someone asks you, you can tell them. Rabbi Yechanan Amar nagu amkar Reb Los ben Yaakov. Rabbi Yechanan says you don't announce it either. If people are behaving like Reb Los ben Yaakov, you don't have to protest. There's 3 levels here of psak. One is something that you announce, you answer quietly, or you don't protest if they do it. Those are 3 levels. Amalei Abaye Reb Yosef. Abaye says to his teacher Reb Yosef, Kaimulan Mishnas Reb Los ben Yaakov Kavanaki. We learned that Reb Los ben Yaakov, his teachings are kav, a small measurement, but naki, they're pure. That means, even though he's not so common in the Mishnah, but everything he says is the halacha. Therefore, and Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel says the halacha is like Rabbi Yaakov. There's a rule that a teacher in the area, a student's not supposed to say the answer before the teacher. Should not give a ruling in the presence of the teacher. But let's say something is so obvious. Is that considered a ruling? It's not even a ruling. Everyone knows that. Say it's what time it is, whatever. It's not a. So this is so obvious because Mishnah to say the halacha is like Rabbi Yaakov. Is that a ruling that a student can do in front of the teacher? Amalei, so Rabbi Yosef says, "Afilu beyasa bekutcha." By my name, Rav Chisda Kol Shani D'Ravuna V'Layari. Rav Chisda, during the lifetime of Rav Huna, wouldn't even paskin that you're allowed to have eggs with cheese, an omelet. What's the problem? Well, an egg comes from a chicken, and are you allowed to mix it with milk? Kutach is a milk dip, soured milk. We put salt in with breadcrumbs or whatever. Rav Chisda wouldn't even say something so obvious. That's Rashi's pshat. Tosfos says, no, it's something a little more sophisticated here. It's when the egg is still in the chicken. It's a little bit more complex. But whatever the case is, Rabbi Yosef is saying that you can't give any psak, even if it's obvious. Amalei Rav Yaakov bar Abba Labaya. Let's say it's written in the book. You see, in those days, they didn't really have a lot of books. They only had a few things that were written down. So let's say Megillas Tainus was one book, one scroll. It was already written. In that, it had all of the fast days and the days that you're not supposed to fast. It was the No Tachman book that they had back then. Megillas Tainus, all the miracles during the second base of Megillah. So can you answer from it? It's written already. So is there a problem to say what it says in there in front of the teacher? Amrlei, so Abaya says, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yosef, my teacher said, Rav Chisda wouldn't paskin anything in front of Rav Huna. Even Beisa Bekutcha, that's the expression. Even egg with milk, with cheese. Yogurt, it's probably more similar to yogurt. Rav Chisda Eiruvin Bekafri b'shnei de Rav Huna. When Rav Chisda was in the city of Kafri, he would paskin, even though Rav Huna was alive, because Rav Huna lived in Pumbedisa, but it's a different city, so that wasn't a problem. Or on top of Samach Gimel, Rav Hamnuna Eiruvin Becharta de Arges b'shnei de Rav Chisda. Rav Hamnuna would paskin in Charta de Arges. Charta is the name of the city, and Arges was some sort of magician. Rashi says that he built the city. And during the life of Rav Chisda, we said lived in Kafri. So Rav Chisda was in Kafri, and Rav Hamnuna, who was a student, would paskin because he was in a different city. He was in Charta of Arges. Maybe there were two Chartas. Tosfos points out that there must have been two Rav Hunas here. Two Rav Hamnunas, because one is a student of Rav, that's much older. Okay, Ravina Sar Sakina beBavel. Ravina would check the knife in Bavel of a butcher, of a sheichet. He would check the knife. He would check it on the finger. The reason why they check the knife is to make sure there's no nicks in it. But the sheichet can do that. So, in order to give respect to the Rav, you take the knife to the Rav to give respect to him. Now, Ravina would check it. Now, the problem was that Rav Ashi was there, and Rav Ashi was the Rav. Amalei Rav Ashi, my time of Marhachi, Rav Ashi had a good relationship. He says, why are you doing that? So, Amalei, Rav Hamnuna Rebecharta Dargis b'shnei de Rav Chisda. Rav Ashi was in a different city. Rav Ashi was in Masa Machsia, and Ravina was in the city of Bavel. So Ravina responds to Rav Ashi. He says, well, Rav Hamnuna would paskin in Charta de Arges, even though Rav Chisda was alive. So I'm paskining in Bavel, while Rav Ashi, while you are in Masa Machsia. Amrlei, he says, Lav Oiri Itmar. You got it wrong. It doesn't say that Rav Hamnuna would paskin. It says Rav Hamnuna would not paskin. You missed the not part. Amrlei, Itmar Oiri Vitmar Lo Oiri. It says both actually. And B'shnei de Rav Huna Rabbe Yehud Lo Oiri. You're right. When it says that he wouldn't paskin, that was in the days of Rav Huna. That was the teacher. He wouldn't paskin even though he was in a different city. However, but it does say that he would paskin in the years of Rav Chisda, while Rav Chisda was alive. The Talmud Chaver Dilehu, because he was a Talmud Chaver. Talmud Chaver Rashi learns that he was just as wise. Rav Hamnuna was just as wise as Rav Chisda. The thing is, he learned from him certain things. So, learned from him certain things. He taught him a few things. It's considered Talmud Chaver. He's a Chaver, but he taught him 2 halachas or whatever. 1 halacha, so it's considered as, he becomes a student because he learned one thing. So that, he allowed to paskin in another city. I'm also a Talmud Chaver of you, tells Rav Ashi. He says, we're the same, and I learned from you a few things, but in a different city, I'm allowed to paskin. Okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, Tzurva merabanan chazil nafshay. A yeshiva student, or a young scholar, is allowed to check his own knife. He doesn't have to go to the Rav to show it to him. Ravina ikla l'mechuza. Ravina comes to Mechuza. That happens to be the city of Rava. I see yesh bezichna sakina v'kamachilei. So the host brings a knife and shows it to him. Amalei zilam teil Rava. So Ravina says, go bring it to Rava. Rava was the Rav. Amalei leisever amar had Rava. You don't hold it what Rava says. Tzurva meraban chazal nafshay. The yeshiva bacher can check it himself. We don't have to show it to Rava. Amalei ano mizban tzvina. He says, I'm not checking for myself. I'm buying the meat from you. It's not really for myself. I'm buying whatever I'm buying, and there's going to be leftover, and that's you're going to sell. It's not really for myself. Simin zila lahani machlafi kabiyakov. Okay. Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya, Rabbi Abba bar Tachlifa, Rabbi Acha bar Tachlifa. Iklo lebei Rabbi Acha breder Ravika, ba'asri de Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov. A bunch of people there. There's Rabbi Acha breder Ravika. He's the host. The Rav of the town is Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov. And these 2 sages, Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya and Rabbi Abba bar Tachlifa, happen to be in the house of Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov. So the host wants to make them an igla tilsa. Tilsa is a calf that's grown 1/3. That's when the meat is the best. Rashi brings another pshat, but he has a question about it. He brings another pshat that it's the 3rd born calf. His question on it is that it says in another Gemara that Rav Chanina and Rav Aishia were learning the Sefer Yetzirah, and they would try to make an igla tilsa, like a golem. They would make it out of whatever, clay or something. And then they would make it alive, then they would shecht it, they would have what to eat. So if igla tilsa means that it's a 3rd grown, then great. But if it means the 3rd born, then how do you make a 3rd born? You can't make it was never in the womb. It can't be a 3rd born. So that's Rashi's kash on it. He says igla tilsa means a 3rd grown. So he wanted to make for them an igla tilsa. This is an actual animal. This is not the robotics laboratory. So I see sakina v'kamachvilo. So he brings a knife. He shows it to Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya and Rabbi Acha bar Tachlifa. Rabbi Acha bar Tachlifa lelecha shlo l'saba. Are you concerned about Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov, the Rav? You have to show the knife to the Rav. No, Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya says no. Rav says, you could see it. He could check it himself. Chazi b'yanish Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya. He checked it, and Rabbi Elazar me'agrunya was punished because of that. Doesn't say what happened. Gemara says, but he was right. Rav actually says that. Why was he punished? No. He was like disregarding, like flippant. We mentioned the Rav. Once you mention them, then you can't just disregard. They brought him up, and we said we should. Then you decide no. That's already a. If no one would have asked the question, it would have been fine. But you ask the question, you have to deal with it. Could be also another thing. Rav Yaakov was very great, and over there you can't mamish. That's a different story. Okay, Amar Rava. Rava says, but to separate someone, to distance someone from sin, that you're allowed to answer in front of a teacher. Ravina Yosef Kamei, the Ravashi. Ravina is sitting in front of Ravashi. He sees someone is tying his donkey to a tree, palm tree, on Shabbos. You're not allowed to use a tree on Shabbos. He screamed at him, but he didn't listen. Put that fellow in Cherem, he's not listening. Now, Amalei, Ravina says to Ravashi, Ravina did this all on his own. And he tells to Ravashi, did I do okay? Was that chutzpahdik, what I just did? I answered in front of the Rav, in front of Ravashi. So there's no wisdom, there's no understanding, there's no counsel before God. If there's an issue of chil Hashem, you don't have to give respect to the teacher. And so what he did was okay. Yeah, I had a question on the Rambam. Rambam writes that Yaakov Avinu thought maybe there's a psul, the Zarai. So the son said, Shema Yisrael Avinu, I think the Rambam writes. Listen, Yisrael, our father. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We all believe in Hashem. I asked, why did they say Yisrael Avinu? You don't say the father's name. So I asked this to a guy. There was a guy in the yeshiva, used to hang around the yeshiva, lived in his car. So he tells me, it was a Talmud Chacham. He says, probably what the Rambam is bringing out, or what the sons were saying, is that Kol Makom Sheyesh Chil Hashem in Chalkom Kavod L'Rav. That they wanted to bring that out, that they don't have to give respect to the father if there's a possibility of Chil Hashem. Anyway, that would fit with this. Amar Rava. Rava says, when someone's coming to ask the question, so in front of the teacher, you can't answer. It's aser, b'chayev misa. Death penalty from heaven, very strict. We learned in Brachas, remember, with Shmuel Paskin in front of Eli. Remember that tomorrow. Shaloi b'fanav, but if he's not there, then it's aser. But vein chayev misa. There's no chayev misa. It's still aser. Shaloi b'fanav, loi. 1 second, what's the problem if he's not there? But Tanya, we have a brisa. Maybe that question is the other way. We have a brisa. It says that why did the sons of Aaron die? Because they paskened in front of Moshe. Midrash, what did they say? So it's v'nosnu b'nei Aaron ha'kohen ate eish al mizbeach. The sons of Aaron will put fire on the mizbeach. Amru af al pi she'ha'eish yeredes min hashamayim mitzlavi min ha'adid. It's a mitzvah, even though the fire comes down from heaven, but it's a mitzvah for us to do our part and to light the fire ourselves. Okay. Are we asking a question? Or are we done with the question? Let's go further. Let's see. Maybe it'll take us back. So that's what they dash. Now the truth is that they brought the fire inside. This was outside. It wasn't a real drush that they're relying on. But the reason why they died was because they paskin in front of Moshe. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, he had a student. Shahir Allah b'fanav, he paskin in front of him. Amar Rabbi Eliezer le'ema shalom mishtay. Rabbi Eliezer says to his wife, Ema Shalom. She was a sister from Gamliel. He says to her, to me, I'll be surprised if this fellow makes it through the year. And he actually died.
Shalom?
Ema Shalom.
I'm saying, but she had the name Shalom in it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never knew that Shalom was used for a female.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe
other than Shlom Tzion, something like that.
Shlom Tzion, right. Maybe when you combine names, they become like one name. That's a whole discussion. If two names become one name, or if two names are two individual names. Maybe that's the difference. So, and he actually didn't survive. Amalai Naviata. She tells to her husband, Rabbi Eliezer, you're a prophet. I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet. But that's what I received in the teaching, you see. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, everything he said, says, I have no chidushim, I'm only saying over what I heard. You can't pass in front of the teacher, whoever does is chayiv misa. Rabbi Bar B'Chanan, Rabbi Yechanan, I said, Talmud Yehuda ben Goria Shmei. Rabbi Bar B'Chanan says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, you know that Talmud was? Yehuda ben Goria. And he was far 3 parsais away. Aha. See, this is the end of the discussion. This is the conclusion of the question, you see? Even if you're not in front of the teacher, it's still a problem. Still chayiv misa. My answer is b'fanav hava. He was in front of him. He lived 3 parsais away, but when he said that, he was in front of him. So then what's he saying? He's 3 parsais away. He says like this, according to your logic. Why do you have to say who his father was in his name? It's gossip. Old newspapers. What do you do with what's that information for? He's not saying that he lived 3 parsais away to teach me that he said the halacha 3 parsais away. He's coming to tell me that the person actually existed. It wasn't just a parable. It wasn't an anecdotal, legend. This was that the person really existed. He lived 3 parsais away. He happened to have been there. We know his name, and it's a real thing. But we're answering that it's only when the student is in front of the teacher that there's an issue. Anyone that rules in front of the teacher, in front of the rabbi, is worthy of being bit by a snake. This is the friends of Eiruvin. One of them is Eliu. And he says, I'm younger, and therefore I withheld from speaking. The creeping on the ground. And so that's referring to that word, zeichalti, as I withheld from speaking, is associated with zeichle yafa. Means if he speaks, he could be bit by a snake. Ziram Rab Chanina, Nikra Chayte. Ziri says, name of Chanina is called the sinner. In my heart, I keep hidden your words. I don't sin. If I would speak in front of the teacher, it would be a sin. Rav Hamnuna Rami. Rav Hamnuna did this as a question. David HaMelech says, in my heart, I held the words. I didn't speak it out. So besides tzedek b'kal rav, it says, I announced your righteousness. It means I did speak. Like Kash kam b'zman she'ira hayiri kayim, kam b'zman she'in ira hayiri kayim. Depends if his teacher, ira hayiri, was existing. It says ira hayiri was a kayim. And apparently he was David's teacher. So that's when Amar Rab Abba Bar Zav, okay. We should leave it right here.